Hello and welcome. This is actually the Rojas Report. In fact, I'm going to change that. There we go. Rojas Report. And I have the man of the hour, Tim McMillan, joining us from Germany once again. Hello. Great to see you again.
Great to see you again too, Alejandro. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm actually getting to relax now. I'm sitting down. It's been a busy week.
Good. Yeah. Take it easy. I'm sure it has been. So, and I guess what we'll start off, of course, lots of people are really excited, lots of questions coming in, and we'll definitely get to those. But I want to start off. You've got this new venture, the Debrief. Awesome stuff. I love what you're doing there. I love all of it. You know, the defense, the science, the space. Tell us how this came about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this came about, really it was the brainchild of me and my two partners, who I think everybody are very well familiar with and all friends, MJ Benias and Micah Hanks. And, we're friends outside of here, and we've been talking about this for a while. And anybody who's seen our work before, me and MJ wrote for Vice for a while and Popular Mechanics. And we were at a place where we felt like, I don't say we weren't covering what we wanted to, but we weren't covering it the way we wanted to, if that makes any sense. And that's not to speak poorly about any of the publications we wrote for. Love them and would write for them again in a heartbeat, and maybe still, even with this at times.
And an example would be like, maybe, I know this kid's frustrating for me too. They want you to summarize your story in 1,000 words. And it's like, whoa, I don't know how to do it in less than 3,000. So.
Exactly. Or there were times when I felt like, we would report on the UFO topic per se, that I felt was very serious. Like we were talking about legitimate information of elected leaders, what's going on with intelligence committee bills. I mean, this is, if they were talking about anything other than UFOs, this would be something that would be treated very serious, straightforward news.
Yes.
And we would do the work just like anybody else would if they were reporting on, what's going on in Iran or whatever. And then we would get a silly headline and a picture of Tom DeLonge, not bad mouthing him, but what Tom DeLonge has to do with the Senate Intelligence Committee, I don't have a clue, but it would be like Tom DeLonge's UFOs are doing, and we were like, and so, it wasn't about whether there's a stigma or what is your pre-existing belief of UFOs is irrelevant to me. It's, hey guys, these are serious elected leaders talking about it. These are serious people in the community. Like, can we treat it seriously? Because if they're all crazy, well, that's a fair point the American public need to examine there. And so we decided we wanted to do something a little different to bring that credibility. But in addition to that, we all really enjoy, and I think it spurns off of the UFO topic, because when we talk about UFOs, what we're really talking about potentially is a disruptive technology that changes everything. And, that's our big thing, is covering disruptive science and technology, because it's coming. I think anybody who's listening, or even yourself, Alejandro, you think about what life was like 20 years ago for you, 30 years ago, whatever, to now. I brought up I can remember being a kid and being excited and when we went and bought a VCR and we would go to Blockbuster, and now those don't even exist. And so our lives are always evolving through science and technology. And so where are we going to be in the next 20 years? And we wanted to look at that. Can we look at it? And moreover, can we look at it and see what's coming and maybe try to provide both some insight, but then a little different ethical perspective? I think if people have seen some of the articles we've put out recently, the article I mentioned about consciousness, or even the drone article I did, talking about the drone swarm, I don't just report on that, but also bring in those questions that I think people need to be asking. Like, if consciousness is energy, that the potential to develop weapons is there. We need to talk about this, because before it happened, the drone swarm, we need to ask ourselves, how comfortable are we sending 250 autonomous drones into an urban environment that, like I pointed out, that technically by policy now you could give the order to kill and then deploy. And, let's have these conversations, because it's unfortunate that we have a bad habit of only having those conversations when something bad happens.
I write on these genres as well, because I have this popular interest. And I think what
Sure.
gives us a unique insight
Mhm.
that the media is ignoring, and I want to talk to you more about that,
Mhm.
is that this conversation, UAPs are going to be part of the science and defense conversations going forward. They already are to some degree, but I only see that increasing over time.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you have to decide, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the stuff in the recent articles, but you have to decide either this stuff is make believe, the photographs are all fake. Every person who, in many instances that I've interviewed who have had experiences or just are involved in this, they have some motivation and intent that I can't seem to discern that would make them liars, or there's something really going on here that frankly appears to be more complex than oftentimes we try to make it. And it brings up a lot of questions, that go with that. And, that should kind of be more maybe responsibly or maturely examined. Because I mean, do we really want to have a UFO right now? Will we be responsible with it? Some people might say no. Some people would look at how we've treated things in these other technology domains, and so there's so much, and I think I'm sure we'll get into that. But that was the thing that fascinates me in looking at the UFO topic, especially recently, where we talked about underwater stuff. Is I find myself connecting and talking to people who are in a diverse number of scientific, academic, engineering fields. And you're like, gosh, just exploring UFOs, gosh, it touches on so many other things that maybe people would think would be more practical. And you learn so much more about it. And I think that's always been what fascinates me. And it's a great mystery because it's a slippery topic you can't seem to pin down.
Uh-huh. And I think that first I want to point out something.
Mhm.
And I think this is really important for the viewers. When as journalists, when we're writing articles and you're using terms like if,
Mhm.
possibly, um, you know, we're not saying these aren't opinion pieces that we're
Right.
writing. These are, so when we say if or possibly, it's because a scientist or an academic or some other authority has suggested that's the case.
Sure.
So because sometimes, people will say, well, and with these stories today that we'll get to, Tim, why are you saying this? Why are you saying that? And you're kind of like, I'm not saying this. I'm reporting what someone else is saying.
A really good example, and I'm sure you'll want to get into it more, but if you look at the article we put out yesterday was really straightforward, and I think people are like, holy cow, like there's all this great information. And in fact, that I think for a lot of people the takeaway is like, wow, there's something really crazy going on here that's can't be debunked easily and normal. And then you look at the picture that we put out today, and I think a lot of people, justifiably so, I mean, we were said it in the article, it kind of looks like a balloon. We're not blind to that, and we didn't suggest it wasn't. I mean, we asked atmospheric scientists, what do you think? And when he said it looked like a Mylar balloon, we're going to report that. um and but it's all still this, like, it's all coming from the same space, and that's the important thing, is that I can't throw out the baby with the bathwater at any point in time and say, well, man, that one yesterday really suggests that maybe we've got some underwater aliens or whatever, and this balloon isn't impressive. You know what? Forget that. Let's not talk about it. No, we do have to talk about it. And I think that's then the responsibility. None of us want to be or aim to be, video researcher, analyst of this stuff, or investigators who are going out in the field. There's so many people that are good at that do that. We're just arbitrators of information and bring it out there. And I think that's the responsibility of the people who are good at that, to look at that and do that. But all we can do is say, here it is. Here's what this is accurate. This is where it comes from. And I can't tell you the background behind whether it's a balloon or not a balloon. I don't know. But
Yeah, we'll definitely get into more details on that. But before we leave kind of the topics that you all are covering at the debrief, and why I think it's exciting also kind of relates to this story by MJ. And of course, you probably know I had him on last night. This one study astronomer bets you a cup of coffee that we find aliens by 2036. Now, that's a line that Shostak has been using for a while now. I saw him do it live. I use a excerpt in one of my lectures of him saying that. But the point is, and this is what's really exciting about this space, is the SETI guys, I think, are moving closer to our space, and we're more moving closer to theirs. And I think there will be connections to be made by people like us, like I think the SCU or other organizations who are willing to work with the mainstream. And I think that can only be good. In fact, for instance, we work with the SCU, we work with some of the people who work on SETI. And for instance, they're now looking for techno-signatures. What is that? We've called it xenoarchaeology in the past, but essentially they're looking for signs of intelligent civilizations being, let's say, an ancient relic that we find on the moon. They're actually looking for that kind of stuff, which is the same kind of thing we're looking for, alien technology.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, Alejandro, and I cringe to even mention this because, there's no telling what'll come out from it.
That means it's juicy.
Yeah, well, I would just say that I've been very fortunate, and I didn't do anything but reach out, by the way, and be nice. But I've been given kind of carte blanche access to NASA's Techno-Signatures program, and so I have interviewed the program manager. And
wow.
We will, if it wasn't for COVID, we would go down there and I'd go down there and visit with them and see what exactly they're doing. But that's a feature that I have coming out. That is exactly what you said. This is the hunt for alien technology. This is not a play on words. This is not clickbait. This is, for the first time, NASA in 30 years is funding the hunt, not just for alien life, but technology. And it's fascinating. And I think people are going to hear that and they're going to be like, yes, this is it. Where are they hunting? In Roswell? No, but they're looking in a different way. And I won't give the whole article away, but the program manager made such a great quote. For him, it's exciting because we're hunting smart life now, not just dumb life. And
great quote.
But you're right. I mean, that's, these things are being examined more, and because we now know that there's other planets out there. We always suspected it. We all know that. And if we're the only life in the universe, I don't even know, that to me is more scary or depressing, or I don't know what, than the idea that there's not teeming with life, because you got to go, whoa, what the heck happened here?
That's right. An anomaly.
Right. But you're right. There's so many other breakthroughs like that, and it is mainstream. So I won't go any more of that, because God knows there's no telling what rumor might spread with that. But I do have a feature coming out that I think is not. I will go ahead and say it is not UAP. It's not going to be NASA is hunting for UFOs or UAP in the atmosphere. Rather, they are examining the idea that there is extraterrestrial life that has technology, and they're going to try to look for it. So cool thing to bring up.
Let's get into these articles, and I want to start this off. Now, MJ and I were pretty critical of UFO Twitter and the people online last night, and so we don't really need to get too much into that, but
I thought I was a feisty one. MJ's in here picking fights. Jesus.
He is feisty. He was last night. And this is our office. This is the UFO Congress headquarters. So you see one of the executives with the organization in the back printing some stuff out there. But what I was going to get at, though, is, and I think it's important to say this off the bat to clear things up with people before we get into the story. A lot of these fantastical claims about what you were going to be showing were made up by people who had no idea what you were going to write about. They only knew that you had a story coming, or maybe they saw me interview James Fox, who said there's big news coming. And that's all he said. And people blew this up to this is disclosure is coming, government's releasing everything, all of these things. And what's funny is now they're like, well, Tim's story wasn't what I thought it was going to be. That's not Tim's fault. Tim's not the one who made that stuff up and made all these fantastical claims, just so people know that. So don't beat Tim up about it. Tim came up with this fantastic piece of information and great investigative work to bring this forward, and we'll get into that. But just so people who are watching know, this was not Tim who blew this up into this big story. And what do you what are your thoughts about that? You know, how that kind of the same thing happened to the New York Times article just a month or so ago. How do you feel about it?
Well, gosh, it's a complex issue because I'm not going to sit here and badmouth anybody, and I think it would be wrong to say that people getting excited, and I do understand why, because I know there's a lot of people who have invested considerable amount of time in this topic. I mean, you know, done considerable research, and there's individuals who legitimately, you know, feel like they've had very personal experiences. You know, I've never had that, so it's not my place to say that didn't happen. It very well can, and so it's a very personal topic for some of these people, and I think that it's difficult to spend a lot of your life really invested into something, and not even the people I want to say that are dogmatic about it, so like they're really into it, but I mean the people who've really read some books, examined it, and it's frustrating because, and I'll say this with 100% sincerity, I did, you know, almost 20 years in law enforcement, and at times it frightens me. This may be a testament to the criminal justice system, and I can accept that, but I feel like I have sat there and testified on the stand and seen people convicted for crimes like murder, and they, you know, spend the rest of their life in prison for less evidence than I think would suggest that there's something to this topic. And so I get the passion and people being upset of like, have you read this? Because you see the very superficial dismissal of things. You know, we've seen it in something published today. Like I said, that's just a balloon. No aliens, we're done. And you're like, okay, but you just read a whole bunch of other stuff. Like we're not, but I get that. And I get the excitement.
And I think a lot of people just look at the pictures and they don't read the story. You know, that happens a lot. I mean, you get that, we get that. There's a lot of that going on this morning where people are commenting and it's like, read the story and then, you know, it'll answer a lot of your questions.
And that is why we didn't print that picture with that first article. I mean, when people are like,
I noticed that. Yeah.
Because I felt like it would have distracted. I thought there was a lot of really good information in that first article. I was hoping people would absorb. So we wanted to separate it a little bit, you know. But yeah, I get the passion, and I think for this story, I tried to mitigate as much as possible. There were some people, you know, that I gave statements like, "Hey, somebody put a nice little graphic together. Good for them." Engaging the phenomena on Twitter, saying, "Hey guys, I am working on a story. I intend to publish it this day. I don't know if I'm working on, quote, the story that everybody's excited about, James Fox. I mean, I still don't know." And was very candid in saying, I don't know how significant it is yet. It's not done. And that's the truth. You know, there were still more interviews. There were still things. There were still more, you know, pieces of evidence that maybe we wish we could have published, that if we could have got a hold of. But it just takes a life of its own. And I think, but no one should be mad at anybody. And I've had this discussion. I'll just go ahead and name names because I know my own fault for getting mad about Bob McGuire. And I think that was probably uncalled for on my part. Yeah, I've said it, because for me, you put in so much of this stuff, and I don't even expect anybody to understand. I really don't. But you put so much into this stuff, and you do so many things, and you're inherently talking to people who work in places and deal with things where they don't talk to anybody, and so there's just, you know, the article itself was worked on for 8 or 9 months. The relationships that are garnered there to have trust go back years before I ever reported on a UFO. And so you look at that, and then that particular case, and I have no problem now that it's all out in the open. And I talked to Bob after that. My upset with him was never about the story, like scooping or anything. It was that unknown to him. And you saw, if anybody read the first story, hey, Bob, there's some classified information that's being discussed here. You know, I don't want, you know, I don't want to see you put yourself in any position that you are, you know, this is not a joke. And I mean this in the best way possible, is that I see a lot of times in the UFO world, you have like real classified information and you have like secrets that they're not classified. They're just secrets, and they get confused. But
kind of like ATIP was. I mean, ATIP was a secret. It wasn't classified.
Well, yeah, or like you've seen the release of that SNIE, you know, a few months ago, that people debate whether it's real, and it's like, well, it's highly classified, and you're like,
it's not.
Well, if it was, people would go to jail, guys. Like this is the thing. It's like you've got to So I have a legal obligation and moral obligation to protect my own sources. And then addition, which Bob is not one, nor is anybody he talked to, but I'm looking at him going, hey man, be careful, because I'm going to publish some stuff responsibly that came out of classified systems, and I don't want to see you get in trouble. I don't want to see, so just be careful there, and don't assume that there's going to be some photo officially released by the government, so it's cool, I can talk about it. And that was my biggest concern, is I would hate to see anybody get in trouble for something that was unnecessary.
And I want to let people know Bob McGuire is a scientist who has done some work, kind of like Eric Davis or Hal Puthoff in unclassified programs. He's retired now, and he did speak to this morning. He did say that he retired in May, and so he doesn't work on any classified programs anymore. And he did say that, he had been shown that off the, not in a sense that it was classified. So he didn't believe it to be when he spoke to that. So he said, I was thinking about that. But somebody else had another question and trying to mitigate some of these issues. And I had answered this question from my perspective previously. But Matt is saying, why not stay totally silent on the article until it drops and speaks for itself? And I'll note, no news organization in the world does that. But
sure. Fair point, because there was some convoluted, things got convoluted because the initial kind of teasing out was the launch of the Debrief, which we always wanted to do because we had a new site. I mean, you know how that goes. We wanted to get some attention. Just happened to coincide with this other article coming out. And I take responsibility for that. That's where
I don't think it's a problem, though. I don't think there's that's how you get the news out that you've got a website coming, or that's how you get the news out that people should pay attention because you have an interesting article coming out. It's fair. Everybody does it. How, long before, let's say, an interview with the president, do we have advertisements for that, before it releases? It's standard practice.
Sure. Yeah. No, it definitely is. And I think and that's, I guess one of the parts there is that, I always tell people I try to stay really kind of segmented from the quote UFO community. That's not because I don't respect people that are in it. It's not because I think that the topic is silly. Clearly not. It's that I think I try to maintain that distance for good reason, because it helps me in what I do, because we're communal animals. And, like when you're in the community, you want to make the community happy. And so sometimes you realize, it's easy to go, well, I'm not going to report on that because that's not going to make people happy. Or maybe I'm going to, pump that up a little bit. And so it's important, and that can be implicit. And so it's important to stay out of that. And I have this downfall that I truly believe that none of this information belongs to me. None of this information belongs to anybody. It's public information. And so I have to realize that, when it comes to UFO community, trying to walk that fine line of wanting to share information. And I don't like holding secret from anybody, even though I know, like, hey, the article's in the work. I want to tell people, but yet realize that sometimes it can take a life of its own, and that can hurt things. And so I think it's, as people said, that the article today of the picture came totally out of the blue on purpose. Still crashed our computer. Our network.
Great job on that. Yeah, you didn't. I even was. I didn't push him too far, but we were even asking MJ about the photos, and he did not give up anything. He did a great job at not giving up. But, one last question before we get into the article, especially now that we're on the media and everybody's asking about that. It does seem, and I have a feeling, that some of the TTSI guys feel similarly, that this topic has not gotten as much press as expected. So, for instance, you were talking about how you were examining and writing like mainstream media should and would normally on any other topic. But somehow, because I feel like I do the same, like with my Chris McMillan article and my latest ones, that's something the others should be doing, but aren't. Are you kind of surprised that the media hasn't picked up some of this a little more? You would think that, there's been very little even about the Senate Intelligence Committee, tackling this issue.
Well, sure. And although, I will say that the Daily Caller followed up our article and called me Tim McMillan. So I was happy with that. Maybe I should
Ooh,
own it like a rap name, like a citadel.
yeah,
And, I can wear a
that
big
would be
millionaire
cool.
jacket. Yeah.
Be Tim McBillion, though, because that's kind of cooler.
Right. Yeah. Billions. Yeah.
Gosh, millions. Everybody's got $1 million these days, but $1 billion.
Right. I need to get up with inflation. It's a difficult topic in the mainstream media. And I'll be honest with you. So this comes from reporting on it just in Popular Mechanics or Vice and having friends who report on it in other mainstream media outlets. It's a difficult topic because, first of all, the information is kind of a wilderness of mirrors. And so if you're going to what I do, where you're reporting on stuff that's out of the national security world and the UAP task force, all of this stuff is uber classified and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see plenty of national security reporters that dig into, other issues, like the assassination of the nuclear chief in Iran. And so you see them doing that kind of stuff. But when it comes to this topic, I don't think that people see it yet as something that's significant in that same sense. I'm very fortunate because, a couple of years ago, when I first started looking into this, having a good longtime family friend who worked in this, in the intelligence world, just say, hey man, this is a big story. And just say, this is something serious, and just, kind of leave it at that. And I was like, okay. And so that's kind of where I learned in this journey. And I think hopefully it will continue. It'll one day prove that it is a big story. But I don't know that everybody else has accepted it, and it's still, it seems, silly isn't the right word, but it doesn't. They don't think it's going to generate the attention that they want, because right now it's about doom and gloom, either what's going on with the pandemic or the political climate and everything, because that gets people all excited and heated. And I think if they thought the aliens were coming, that it really was aliens that were coming here to kill us, we'd probably get more mainstream attention, because they'd be out there on the street. What do you think about dying from the aliens? But it is a complex thing that, even as I've gone through this and talking to people, it's weird to walk away at the end of the day and feel like you've talked to some very informed people, who are working inside it, and still walk away going, I don't know, because they don't know.
And that's the big part, that the enigma, which is really hard for anybody to deal with. But so getting to the article, the big one from yesterday, and then we'll get to today's in a little bit here. But here's the article. I posted the links earlier, and I will post them in the show notes if you're watching this on replay. But the debrief.org, right, is where people can go to look at this stuff. Fast movers and transmedia vehicles. We'll get into that. The Pentagon Transmedium, the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. Now, essentially, I'll let you pick up on this, but to just kind of set the basis, what you were able to discover is that the UAP Task Force actually has written a couple of reports, and these reports are exciting, although they've kind of, haven't given us much clue as to what their thought process is on all of this. These reports apparently have really excited the intelligence community, or at least made them think, because they are compelling, and it shows that they really do feel like the UAP phenomena is something real, not ours, not theirs. Who knows what they are? And in particular, in these reports, there were a couple of photos, one of a cube from 2018, one of a triangle from 2019, both taken from the cockpits of jet fighters during these encounters, and that these have gone viral in the intelligence community, and people are really excited about. And you got a brigadier general on record saying, "Hey, these we don't know what they are, but they're not ours, and we don't think they're anybody else's either."
Yes. No, yeah, this is kind of the accumulation. And, this article I would say is kind of a continuation of the one I did in February, which was with Popular Mechanics, which was mostly just ATIP, ALSAP. This was kind of laying the fact. So now we're moving into the recent history, but, how I write an article like this. So a feature is I try to take people, hopefully I'm successful in taking people on kind of the same journey that I have gone is in working this. And, it started with me receiving a FOIA request response with the emails from the Vice Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Vice Chief of the Navy telling the Vice Chief of the Air Force, "Hey, I recommend you take this UAP," spelling it out, unidentified aerial phenomena briefing, UAP, from Matt Kohler, who was the director of intelligence for the Navy. And saying, "Hey, the Secretary of the Navy is getting it tomorrow." I looked at that. We're talking about the highest of the highest. The Joint Chiefs being the real highest, and then the Secretary of Defense. But people have to understand, in a big organization like that, we're talking about the people who are actually your chief operating officers, your people who are really making the calls. And you see them being briefed, and not only being briefed, but saying, "Hey, you need to be briefed on this." I was like, this is compelling. This
Right.
is, and this is before they've officially, the undersecretary has signed off on this. So you remember, they didn't announce the task force until this year, but a year prior, clearly they're given briefings, which means that there's evidence that was even, unreported by me, or that's discarded, that warranted this. And so when I saw this, I'm thinking, this is not, you don't bother these people if you've got some BS, if you're just silliness and they don't recommend it. This is just, many moons ago, my uncle was a staffer on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And these are people you don't, you don't shake hands with and stuff, because they're like, "Get away from me," because they're that high up. Very nice people. I don't mean it like that. I just mean this is the highest of high. These are the people who make the decisions that affect the national security and defense and military when you're talking about the United States, the world, because it's a global superpower. And so when you see that, I'm going, wow, what is going on here? And so I have never done anything but try to do things the right way. And I reached out to public affairs and said, "Hey, you guys officially released this to me. This shows the Joint Chiefs. I think we're at a point here where there's enough activity. We have the intelligence. We have the intelligence report that's or the request and the Intelligence to Act provision. It's already been officially acknowledged this task force exists, and now we know that this is going on. I think it's time that the people are informed a little more." And I don't say that because I feel entitled to it, but rather that's how the system's supposed to work. That's how the American the government operates on the informed consent of the public. That's the way it's supposed to work constitutionally. And how can we make an accurate, informed consent and decision if we aren't informed? And so my whole thing was, I don't need to know that how China tried to hack into our computers and how you detected it. I understand that's stuff. I don't need to know that, but still know that China could be a threat to hack into our computers. That's a real threat. And I think that, the American people deserve the same thing when it comes to this, because it seems to be serious. And that was just shot down. And so then it forces into this weird place. And Alejandro, you've been reporting and been in journalism a long time, that our job then is, we have this weird role where I respect that the people who are trying to maintain secrecy, but yet the reporters who are trying to uncover it, we are both upholding the Constitution. We're both actually doing our jobs. it's to get an informed consent. And so I started reaching out to people, and it just struck at the right time when I spoke to people who, so, very, very important here, because, I'm not going to talk about sources and who and what. I feel like we tried our hardest to give as much information, down to saying that everyone we spoke with worked for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. I mean, that kind of narrows it down. But absolutely no one we spoke with is someone that I would consider, quote, out of the UFO world. Meaning, and I like and respect these people, but like Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, I spoke to Lou after we were done. So because I noticed Chris, I haven't even spoken to Chris. I noticed he retweeted it yesterday, which I really appreciate. But this was as shock to him as it was everybody else. I respect them, but I know what their opinions are on the topic, and I know that they've already been exposed to stuff and believe it. I want to hear the other people too. I want to make sure that we're trying to get as objective and unbiased information. And so when I started reaching out to people, and it happened at a good time when this second memo had come out, that everybody was like, holy cow, you really got, I mean, yes, I know what you're talking about. And people were willing to talk just enough to say, and I truly interpreted every conversation I had as people were very, very interested at what they were reading in these reports, and having, a little bit of understanding of the type of reports. You realize these are reports. This is not like, Billy at the office types an email and sends it out. These are things that are very formal. They go through numerous chains of command and have to be approved before they go out, because you're disseminating it into the community saying, this is a legitimate intelligence concern or intelligence topic, and we're sending it out here because we want you to be on the lookout to assist in other analyst matters, because you may come across information in your duties that doesn't pertain to this, but we want to know about it. And here's what our position is right now on this information. And so, it goes out to the analyst whose their job is signals intelligence. They're listening to possible terrorists in a foreign country, but now they know about it. And so if they hear, those terrorists saying, oh my God, look at that triangle over the sky, suddenly you go, oh, wait a minute, I need to write that down. That's the reason these things go out, is to inform the communities that are working on it. So very formal. And so when I saw that, I went, wow. So this is very much, and I didn't explicitly state this in the article, but when you see an intelligence report that go out as widely distributed as that one was, including, and I think it got picked up really quick. It's hats off to some savvy people in the UFO world that I kind of specifically mentioned some of the systems it was shared on, but the NSA Net it's a system that's an intranet that the Five Eyes, so our allies at Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the UK are tuned in. They clued in real quick. Ooh, if it was on that system, they got it too. Well, yeah, they did. So we got some great Australian researchers, hey guys, do some digging, because your countries have at least gotten this much.
Which means they've got the two reports and the two photos. And this is a really important part that we still have lacking, even from your great stories, is, and you would know better, I would assume that these reports include why they came to the conclusion that these are unidentified.
The reports that what few details were discussed with me and everything would contain some of that, but the level of classification for that kind of distribution wouldn't contain, and I mentioned that in the article, they're not going to contain the nitty gritty, and it just kind of hinted that, letting people know these wouldn't be what's considered top secret or SAP or compartmentalized information. Yet I'm certain that those types of memos have indeed been prepared and are more narrowly, distributed. But gotcha. Yeah, like what's in that information? Absolutely. And I did hint at that, because I did ask somebody, because the pictures, everybody talking about the pictures. And I said, look, man, please tell me they got more than pictures, because if not, I got some UFO books I can hand them. The community's kind of been inundated with pictures, and they very markedly said, no. The best stuff we have is measurement and signals intelligence. And so That was really compelling, especially when you're talking about water stuff. So yes, I
See,
mean, they
that's great. Because that's what we're looking for at like SCU. That's what the
Mhm.
scientists need. They need that MASN, actual, that's the data, not just photos. In fact, photos give you less data than a lot of other. That's the sort of stuff you can really do some science with.
Right. Yes. I mean, that's the nitty gritty. So that's what's underneath the hood, if you will. And I don't have that information. And frankly, because the systems that will record all of that aren't designed for UFOs. They're designed for national defense and security things. And so, I respect the fact that nobody's going to tell me, especially when it got underwater. And I expressed that tone in my article saying it's bittersweet now, because if the best intel they have is underwater, the idea that we're going to get a huge comprehensive data from there is really unlikely, because that's just an uber. I tell you, we can point to the B-21 Raider, we can point to the RQ-180. These are classified air systems we know exist. In fact, I think they snapped a picture of it inadvertently recently, a couple of weeks ago. But as far as we know, the subs are what, 1980s, 1990. They
Yeah.
have new stuff.
Yeah.
It's just uber classified. And so
Yeah, I want to get more into that because that's a really other in this article, the other really important aspect, I think. But before we move off, I want to say that you had a lot of anonymous sources in your article, but since then, and I think it's great that you didn't use Chris Mellon or Luis Elizondo as sources because that lends more credibility to your article. But since your article has come out, the Washington Examiner, Tom Rogan, he did his own vetting of your information and has confirmed the accuracy. Also, Politico reached out to Luis Elizondo and just posted this morning a comment from him. He said, 2 reports went viral. They included photographs, high res. It made it through the IC. It rattled a lot of cages. It led to a lot of folks to say, we need to take this seriously. So here is Luis Elizondo also confirming your reporting. So we do have independent confirmation beyond just your anonymous sources at this point now.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I feel like any defense editor, worth their salt would be able to, and that's because of the wide distribution. I mean, now that I put it out there, I think that anybody, if they have any sources in any of the intelligence agencies enough that they could call and say, hey, have you read this? Does this seem legit? I'm 100% confident that they would hear, yeah, it's legit. So I think anybody can vet it. And that's, it's kind of like I touched on it. You have to make a decision when you're working in that space to either not report on national security or classified matters responsibly, or do it in a way that you just accept that you're going to have to take the anonymity. We did everything we could to make sure we vetted everybody. And I mean that every single standard to the point of ridiculousness, and to outside editors, to everything, to vet and say this is everything where we're comfortable and happy with it. And the only thing that I have heard thus far that was inaccurate in the article, and we have to make a correction. This is breaking news here, and I would just say it's not our fault. Is that the dates on the meetings that Hal Puthoff said he was at, he was incorrect there. Evidently, there was a different set of meetings in October that he attended, and somebody brought it to our attention. But even then, like, we directly quoted what Dr. Puthoff said. He just was incorrect because those particular meetings were attended by Dr. Eric Davis, and so no harm, no foul. But that's the only thing thus far that we have heard. And I feel confident about everything else. And even in that instance, we said what Dr. Puthoff said.
Right.
Yeah.
And before we move to the photos, we haven't even talked about the photos yet, really, in that much detail. But John Lindy makes a point, and this is why your story is big news. Like, I had a hard time kind of explaining is it big news or not? Of course it is. It's a great news. But it's not a aliens, the Roswell aliens in a hangar type of thing, which I know a lot of the UFO community was looking for. So it's kind of like, some of you might not find it exciting, but I do. I know James Foxwood does. You do, obviously. So this news is big news, and James Lindy kind of said just now in the quotes, this is the big news, is that now we know how seriously these people and how high up, this information is getting. That's the big news, that they're really taking it seriously, and they have cases out there more that include photos and other MASNT that support that there really is something anomalous going on here.
Absolutely. And I didn't include it in this article. There's another one. Let me shut up. We may mention it else a little more, not to get any specifics, but one of the things I was really struck by is when I spoke to people who, again, they're not in the quote task force. They're not, they're in the community, but on the peripheral. So their job is not airborne intelligence per se, but they're familiar with some dynamics that are being used, I believe. Is how they spoke about the leadership of the task force. And so I dropped those quotes because it's still, anonymous sourced, but I mean, just, they wanted to make sure that it was expressed like, leadership of the task force has been consistent. It is stable. It is level-headed. And, one person directly said to me, this is the type of leadership in place right now is the type of people I would want on any intelligence matter. I don't care what it is.
Wow.
If it was who's going to stop the next 9/11 at a very high level. And so, it is not shoveled off to the back office. It is not, Lou having to beg, borrow, and steal because he's having to bootstrap this portfolio. And I'm very impressed by that. And I was very impressed. It sounds crazy about how hard it was to get information and how responsibly people treated it. Everybody treated it like if, like they were like, look, I'm willing to say that there's some honor water stuff, but I'm not going past that. Nothing, I think there's a lot of people out there in the intel world, in the defense world, who maybe up until the last year or 2 years were like a lot of people like, yeah, UFOs. Now they're going, wow, because they may be privy to all that data and everything. And so it's by all
a new
intents
world.
Legit. Yeah.
And you confirmed, of course, a lot of what Elizondo has been saying, including, Elizondo said when he left, the ATIP that retired from the DOD, that someone else took over ATIP, and he told me kind of the rank, but a very high level person. And not only that, he's been telling us that, I was working with other agencies. I wasn't, like you said, just all by myself. Yes. And that's been confirmed, that you were able to confirm that as well. And it's a big deal.
And it's tough because you saw me where I said that I have, and it's true, I have reached out to Susan Goff and the Pentagon and said, hey, I tracked these people down, and it took some work, and I've talked to them, and we're talking about senior people, senior White House advisor, and great people, they're saying, and I appreciate them talking to me, not willing to go on the record because they, and it's not have to do with the UFO topic. That's what's so maddening, and you want to strangle them. It's because of all the stupid politics that goes on in our government, where they're like, oh, well, some people maybe didn't like Lou, or some people were on this partisan team and that partisan team, and I just don't want to cause any frictions in my current personal life. But they confirm all of this stuff. And again, they're totally, I think in every single instance, I would later say, ask for a follow-up from Lou Elizondo and say, hey, I spoke to so-and-so, and they told me, and he'd always be like, what? So it wasn't like there was anything, it never got handed off, but it is tough. You see that and you go, man, yeah, there's a lot more that went on behind the scenes, and there was a lot more people involved. And I was willing to go as far as name those, a couple specific agencies, a Defense Intelligence Agency, and one that hopefully people picked up on, the National Reconnaissance Office, because I will tell you, the NRO is very involved with this, whether people realize it or not. And very much. It wasn't, we just had too much. And so it moved it out of edits, but down to the point of expressing to people, everything's going to the UAP task force now, including, because I had an official inquiry in with the NRO for their files. And they said, hey, thanks for sending that to us. We've got to send it to ONI. And so it was very impressive to see that, like everything is funneling into them. And hopefully that will relate, maybe to see that in period. I just in my experience in government, that's mind-boggling enough.
Here's a question someone has. I think it's a great question. Zignal has it. Do you think the Pentagon doesn't actually mind this being out there? I mean, it would seem, since Susan Goff keeps repeating over and over again, we're not sharing anything about anything regarding the UAP task force. I wouldn't imagine they're very happy about this out there. It doesn't seem they're happy about Elizondo's illuminations.
Well, there's separate entities here. So always remember that. You've got the Public Affairs Office, but the Public Affairs Office isn't attached to the task force per se. They're not attached to the NRO,
Right.
And so do I think the Public Affairs Office is thrilled? Oh, God, no, because it started a bunch of stuff. And you saw me in that article where I said, after they wouldn't tell you anything, I said, well, here's the DoD policy. What is your posture? It's required by policy. Just tell me, active, passive, whatever. And they were like, no. And so it's like, but that was a hint, I will say, that I didn't spell out, and saying they don't have a posture right now. They don't have an official public affairs guide. They have a holding statement. That's why Susan Goff keeps giving the same one over and over. In terms of, do I think that the people in the task force are actually doing the work, or the people inside the community doing the work are pleased to see it get out? I would say yes. Not like it's, I get people going, this is an intentional leak, or, I hear, oh, Tim is the vessel for disclosure now. No. It's that, you don't have this widespread distribution, period, if you don't realize that you want people to know that it's real. You don't work in government long enough to realize you can't break the law, you can't break your security oaths, you can't do all of this stuff, but you do need the public support and consent. That's where legislation comes in. I heard a lot of very positive things from people after this was reported on the inside, some that surprised me a lot. It was surprising to me. I don't know, because I hadn't spoken to them, but to hear that there are some political leaders that got it. There are people that in high positions that took a look at it. Hopefully, I mean, they were like, let's go get this guy. Hopefully it wasn't the Men in Black in their black van, but
behind you.
I think, Doc. I think that I think that I'm sure, because of the taboo sense of the topic, anybody that's working on it, I think, can hopefully appreciate it. I hope that I walk that fine line of responsibly reporting it as accurately, objectively as humanly possible, and being unbiased. And I hope that they, appreciate that. But I certainly, I don't think the FBI is going to come kicking down my door. But
I take it a prop for a joke. No, nobody minds at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Oh, yeah. But no.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that's a tough one to answer, because you always go, well, no, I actually don't. I think people were happy to get it out there that the work that they're doing is legitimate, and they couldn't do that. But at the same time, I'm always cautious to say that, because there's literally probably a Reddit thread starting right now saying, aha, Tim McMillan's the CIA secret agent. And you're like, fuck, if they only knew how much work goes into it.
So Okay, let's get to, I guess, the images. And the other aspect I think that was really important about this article, this story, is related to one of the photos, which allegedly is, it's represented here. This is an artistic impression. Obviously, someone who familiar with the image, they saw this classic triangle with the lights in the corner coming out of the water. When they caught this picture, and the transmedium nature is really interesting. At SAU, I mentioned this last night. We define UAP as unidentified aerospace phenomena to include the transmedium because obviously that's a big factor here. And that's what's interesting here is that the Navy is really, obviously it makes sense, but the Navy is really into and seems to have these quite a few cases of these objects coming out of the water.
Yes, for me, this was the most fascinating thing of this whole report. It wasn't the picture, and I know everybody's like, "Give me the picture, give me the picture." I don't have the picture to give you. I'm sorry. That's a Rojas Report exclusive. I don't. So even though I snuck a picture out today, I don't have the picture. For me, the biggest takeaway from this was that water aspect, and I got to tell you, I plan on working on, a primer on this USO and transmedium topic because it's fascinating. Because when the literature out there is out there, but the depth of it in terms of some of the other things that have been reported, I think, it's not as easily accessible. And so you suddenly realize that, holy cow, it was a frightening quote, and I didn't include it, but a good interview that I had with an astronomer, or excuse me, a marine biologist, when they correctly pointed out, we know more about the planets in our solar system, mapping wise, the contours of it, than we know of about 70 or 80% of our ocean. And you're going, oh my God, it seems so much safer when they were coming from out there. If it's something else, like they're coming from here. It just brought up this fascinating idea, because you look at it and say, if they're looking there, well, one thing we can know is the environment is so much more sterile and pure. You don't have to worry about Billy Bob flying his drone down deep in the ocean. You're looking at some of the most sophisticated underwater reconnaissance systems around. And, it was stressed to me repeatedly. And I used part of the quote that I got there when I mentioned that somebody who has an extensive background in this particular area of underwater reconnaissance had said, yeah, no, we have recorded super fast, non-cavitational moving objects on the ocean from times. But they expressed it, explicitly, that it's very clear that they say they're not defying physics, but we don't know how they're doing it, meaning we don't have the capability. But they were really clear to say it's not fantasy. What they're doing isn't fantasy, but we don't know how to do it with the current technologies and fuel and energy. So that's where it becomes compelling. But it really, and I just, I'll tell you, there was about 4,000 more words in that article that we pulled out, because we were like, gosh, we got to do our separate USO feature, because it was so much USO information that we were able to pick up that didn't just pertain to these reports, but there was new information that hasn't come out. And you look at these connections, and I encourage the people who are really good at researching this, because please, by all means, reach out to me or just put that information out, period. Anybody that's seen my work, I always cite everybody and I look at everybody's stuff. But if you start examining some really interesting connections to where you have USO sightings that coincide with UFO sightings, whether it's in similar location and time frames sometimes, that makes you go, gosh, where did it come from? Did the chicken come first? Was it the chicken or the egg? Did it come from the air and go in the water, or the water or the air? That is
Karen actually has an interesting story where she was on a cruise, and she asked one of the staff if they've ever seen anything, and one of them did say that they saw an object come out of the water. But a lot of people are asking about sonar, and you covered this in your article. In fact, you even mentioned Mark D'Antonio, our buddy, who had his own experience, and one of the people you questioned said, well, I'm skeptical about a civilian being on there to witness this, but this happens all the time, that they do catch these fast movers, on sonar under the water.
And he wasn't in that article. He'll be in our USO article. But I spoke to Mark D'Antonio. I interviewed
Whose
him.
article was he in? Was he in Rogan's, maybe?
No, I mean he was in another one, but no,
okay.
I did cite his example because
okay.
he was in Tyler Rogaway had covered it, but
right.
But I interviewed Mark D'Antonio beforehand to hear his account firsthand and everything, and yeah, I mentioned that some of the submariners from Rogaway's article were kind of dismissive that the ride along. After talking to Mark and he explaining like how that came about, and I know where he was, I'm like, no, I don't disbelieve that. And the thing is I think if anybody in the defense world, especially the defense journalist world, realizes that media embeds, even though he wasn't media, but the work that he does in sub modeling, there's a policy for that. You can go
right.
They'll take
Bender, he says, they even took him, and he spent, I think he said it was a few weeks or something. They were like, hey, come visit and get to know what we do better. And he was embedded with the Navy for a while. So yeah, it does happen. And at that time, D'Antonio was a contractor. So
doing sub stuff, but no, they'll load you up at a tank in a war zone. I mean, there's a process for that. I just got the alert about every couple months when they try the Gitmo trials, where you can sign up as a media journalist to go to Gitmo, so no, I mean, that's part of the transparency. So I think that idea of being dismissive that he could have been on it is wrong, but it was corroborated by this idea by all of them. And I think that's the big takeaway. And Mark was very pointed to that. He's like, don't believe me, but that fast movers, that, those objects moving at extreme speeds that wouldn't be consistent with anything other than a torpedo, except for that's in short distances, it's happening. And so what the heck is it? Very, very fascinating. I mean, this is a whole new world. And, I spoke to Steven Zangargo with he's the UAV expert since the 90s. So, I mean, this is a guy who's been dealing with unmanned aerial vehicles since we didn't even know they existed, and helps publish the annual forecast every year, very clearly. And when I asked him, hey, anything about transmedium, that could go in and out of the water? And his response was direct. He's like, I have no idea whatsoever. He's like, there's nothing, there is stuff that people want to develop. And I think I've seen Mick West. I've seen some people be like, oh, well, look at here. We've got this little spider drone that you can shoot out of a tube. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And they want to develop it. But that's a huge difference between something that's as big as a fighter jet coming out of the Atlantic Ocean.
Right, exactly.
But I will say, I mean, it's just going on the theoretical side here, which is something I rarely do. If you can master non-cavitational travel in water, well, the air would seem pretty simple. But one thing that I did not hear, but it was brought up by many of my science buddies after the article came out, and they said, hey, have you had are there any reports of going, terrain moving, as in, if you can move underwater at high speeds, can you move through a mountain? Where's the cutoff in mass density that you're able to pass through? And I'm like, man, I already got enough for doing USOs.
Yeah.
If I subterranean objects.
Although, besides, I guess, Buckaroo Banzai, I think they did that in that movie. But yeah, you don't see really that. As far as reports go, but the water. Even Steve Greenstreet was in here. He mentioned, a lot of famous sightings are around water. Of course, I'm in Phoenix right now. The Phoenix Lights. There's no water around here. Even the rivers are dry. But we're in the desert. But moving on, and I think that you brought up something that's really important when it comes to the nature of the objects and people like Mick West and their comments about there could be this or there could be that. What I think a lot of people miss is what you're reporting, what we've all been reporting on, and the New York Times reported on, was what the Navy is telling us. So the Navy has come to the conclusion that the Nimitz incident, these two incidents with the photos, are unidentified. They can't explain them. The data they have leads them to believe those aren't ours, nor are they Chinese or Russians. We don't know what data they have. We have not seen their analysis, but they're the ones telling us, and that's very compelling that they would do so. And I think that's what people have to keep in mind, especially as we move on to this next article, which is what you released today, where you released one of these photos. And like we talked about, there were two photos. One is a triangle, and although this looks triangular, this is actually the other one, the cube.
Right.
And from what I understand, this was in 2018, an incident where this thing didn't move, and they do claim it's unidentified. However, and you can correct me if this is wrong, the triangular photo and situation, people seem to find more compelling than this one.
Yes, correct. That is correct. Yes, the object that we published today it was photographed in 2018. And whether you believe it's a balloon or not, I just want to point out that that's a new incident off the East Coast. The separate one that was the most compelling, which was released in an intelligence report that was published in late summer of 2020, so a couple months ago, purportedly included a very clear, crystal clear, that was almost universally said by everybody when I said, "Hey, have you heard any new reports that came out?" And they all went, "The triangle." Very clear image of a triangle with these three white lights. Very, that one, in the article, we included it in quotations because that's how somebody described it, as cube-like. When you zoom in, it's, it's something like and I don't dispute. I think a lot of people say it's a balloon. I think somebody's brought up like the good Batman balloon scenario. It may very well be. And I think we covered that. We wanted to make sure that we're not saying what it is or isn't, but we are saying that was included in an intelligence report. That was called an encounter with an unidentified aerial phenomena. I don't have all the data to say that. I also don't have the location. They could be, 500 miles off the, off the coastline for all I know. And so, you have to wonder, well, good God, who was having their Batman were they having their Batman barbecue on a yacht out there? I don't know. I'm not a Mylar balloon expert. I'm just reporting on what was put there. I think some people got mad. MJ, God bless him, I love him. He's the, I thought I was the feisty one, but MJ was getting pretty fired up because people were like, "Well, you need to put it out there that your analysis no, I'm not. It's a balloon? No, I'm not going to editorialize. I'm going to tell you what the intel report said. I'm going to ask a expert in atmospheric science who uses these things what they think. As you see, we'll print it. I think it's a Mylar balloon. It looks like a Mylar balloon. Cool. That's what he says. Here's what the intel people say.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right the way you did it, because expertise matters. And as journalists, we refer to experts. And as journalists, we are not experts in the majority of this stuff. We may be, I may be somewhat of an expert on UFO reports or something because I know the history quite well, but I'm not a photo analyst. I'm not a physicist. And in this case, we have very high level expertise in that it's the Navy that is telling us that this is what they've determined. And I think you had a great quote here. Like you said, you talked to some experts. And I love this quote because from one of them, and you can kind of elaborate if you want on who this was and everything. But in regards to the photo, while the image of the object is not clear, it certainly does not look like a drop spawn. Or no, that's not the one I wanted to look at. Sorry. It's this one. While they did not describe the photo as compelling, the people that you talked to, all three officials we spoke with seemed dismissive of the idea that it depicts a balloon. According to these sources, the photo would not have been issued if there were reasonable estimates that the object was a balloon. given the nature of the intelligence report in which it appeared. We haven't seen that intelligence report, but here
Right.
again, we have expert opinion saying, look, guys, the UAP task force would not have included this image if they thought at all it was a balloon. And I think that's really important and compelling information right there.
No, I agree, and I mean was universally what they said, and in even describing, how these types of reports are produced, in which they go through a series of channels and they go through a series of approvals, and it's not just the guy who puts a YouTube video up. The task force didn't dangle a peanut in front of a camera and then put it out, and so that's their analysis has gone in that. At the same time, I'm not asking anybody to look at that and go, well, case calls, I'm solved. It's really something else. It's really aliens. It's really whatever. I'm not looking at anybody saying, oh, case closed. It's a balloon. I'm just putting out what that information is, as much as that I have available. Unfortunately, and I did push a little bit by saying, was there any more information that said why this wasn't a balloon or anything? And nothing was shared with me about that. So I just know that this went out and everybody goes, look, I don't think, this would be silly for a balloon report to go out, but all saying, no, but we agree with you. It wasn't, it didn't get everybody super excited. But when the one came out more recently, everybody went, oh, wow, we don't know what that is. And so, it's just a very interesting, compelling thing. And there's a lot of savvy people in the UFO world, man. And I'll tell you that there's some great analysts, there's some great researchers, there's some great video image analysts. I mean, that's why we kind of wanted to get it out as well. And so I don't know. There may be people that can analyze that altitude, but that was one of the things that I did examine, was that the average height of a Mylar balloon, based on the helium, that is about 25,000 feet. According to the people, I asked, when I asked them, and that was in the first report, they said it was about 30 to 35,000 feet. And I mean, you can see in the larger image, just kind of the curvature of the horizon. They're pretty high up there. You see, they're pretty, that would be consistent with what I would say at about 35,000 feet. So this is a super Mylar balloon.
And John Lindy just mentioned, that it stayed static in that high altitude where, winds can exceed 100 miles per hour. That adds mystery to what the heck this thing is.
Well, that was explicitly pointed out. We mentioned in an article is that
right.
That was one of the things they said, is that this was motionless, as in it's not moving. I think I've seen some people who took exception to that, saying that, well, that's normal for a balloon. I'm thinking, I've never, here's the thing. And that's the thing that can at times be frustrating, is because just like I can concede, I know what I know and I don't know and I don't know. And one thing that I've never done is I've never flown in a fighter jet at 35,000 feet or 30,000 feet.
Really?
I don't know how many people who comment on it have, because, when I hear people say, well, that's just ridiculous because, a balloon would be doing that. And I'm thinking, okay, but let's do the experiment. Like, I think that would be cool. Maybe me and Mick West can hop up in a dual-seater fighter plane. Isn't he a pilot? Isn't Mick a pilot? Maybe?
I don't know, but the point is, and this is nothing against Mick at all, but I think people,
I love Mick.
And I just here's a big problem though. And Mick, I've talked to him about this, but he doesn't answer me. As journalists, we defer to the experts. Mick is not an expert. He's an expert at software writing, but he's not an expert at FLIR. I've talked to and written about comments from experts on FLIR. In fact, these depot guys that take apart and rebuild the exact FLIRs that are on those jet fighters, and they have something different to say. So, I mean, we've got to go to the expert opinion. and and it's almost a little bit it's not uh, until we have the Navy's information, and that's the key
Sure.
here. This is what the Navy believes. Um,
Mhm.
that will be the key. Now, if the Navy gives us their data and it turns out they're complete fools, which I highly doubt from the most impressive and highly technological and funded and largest Navy ever in history, which is the United States Navy, would get this wrong. But that's what you're contending with.
Sure. Right. And there's more photos of that object, that I've been told there's more photos of the object, you know, that's the thing is that first of all, as an investigator, you already deduced that because how many times are you driving along in your car, Alejandro, and you're like, got my phone ready at any given time. I'm going to stop something. Same thing with the fighter jet. So you can already deduce from what's going on there that they're circling the object. And
Right.
so, I've been told there's other photos there. So maybe there's other more compelling photos. Maybe they got closer. I don't know. I mean, that hopefully, that's one of the things that you mitigate: leaking it out, harm, good, what's going to happen. But maybe this is one of those ones where it forces the hand, where we know that the National Defense Bill passes, this whole UAP report passes. Maybe this is one that they go, fine, let's explain why this report was included, why this photograph was included, and why do we call it unidentified aerial phenomena. And
Exactly. And that's why we can't stop. That's why you can't stop. That's why I can't stop. SCU, all of you guys out there, never assume you're powerless, because that is false. You do have power. You have agency. Ask the UAP task force. Ask Susan Go. Ask your local legislators, because the Senate really does have power to get information out, but they need to know how badly you want this information, that you want it, and we have to be persistent. One of my favorite mottos: patience and persistence. We have to persistently ask for the information, and one day I'm confident we will get it.
Alejandro, I can only do so much, and that's why I went out of my way. And somebody was like, there's no way they're going to answer you, so just don't even, they're too busy right now. That's why I pushed the issue and wanted to get somebody from President-elect Biden's transition team on the record. And even though they didn't talk about UFOs, I hope that, that's incumbent on everybody to say, when he takes office, January 20th at 12:01 p.m., to reach back out to Susan Goff and say, hey, we were told whatever, but push that issue. That's when those politicians. So let's get them on the record. And they said exactly what I believe is true, which is the informed consent of the American people of what God's foreign policy and national defense. They can't make that when they're kept in the dark. And so you take that statement and say, this is why we elected you. This is why we, wanted you here. Are you going to uphold that? That's holding that standard. But that's why I try to do those little things that I can, so that it gives people that ammo to go, no, sir, you can't tell me that. You promised you were going to inform us and push the envelope. And I agree, because that's, just keep pushing and saying, I want to responsibly believe it. But like I said, I don't need to know that I don't need to know how the United States knows that North Korea's nuclear weapon systems are this, and this, or I really don't need to know what their nuclear weapon systems are. But I do know it's a threat, or I do know it's real. I do know that. I think that middle ground can be given in this. I think
Definitely.
so.
Chris Mellon said, nobody should balk. None of those intelligence agencies should balk at creating a non-classified report that is publicly, consumable, because that was something he did on a regular basis, was to, for senators, say to intelligence community, hey, I want to talk on this. Give me what I can say publicly on this matter. And they would do that. So it is a regular process that they do something like that. Another topic came up, and we got to kind of wrap this up. But there was, Danny Silva printed something about where Susan Goff had said Kamala Harris, even though she was on the Senate Intelligence Committee, was not briefed on this issue. So I would think, and do you know anything different? And that does give us room to say, hey, why didn't you attend those briefings? What do you think of the information? What have you heard about that information? Have you talked to Marco Rubio or Mark Warner, who were obviously impressed with what they saw? That allows us the ability to go ask those questions.
Sure. Yeah, that was I know exactly the statement that you're talking about. That was such a weird statement. Because I saw the original kind of response copy, somebody forwarded it to me because they obviously, in doing their due diligence, good for them, was asking her about my article. Like, hey, you got any comment to this? And she just said that the quotes by her were accurate. And other than that, I got nothing else to say. But then she did mention that Kamala Harris hadn't been briefed. I thought it was such a weird comment because the DOD doesn't typically get into that. There's a legislative and executive branches, and they don't talk about what politicians do or don't do.
Good point.
I don't know why that happened. And so, I mean, to me, I think that's a good opportunity for follow-up. I would follow up with Kamala Harris's actual team because that's who knows. I don't, maybe she does know. Maybe, she checked with them. And that was just weird because I don't, that's not how the system works. So, weird statement that she said they weren't, especially given that she's on the Senate Select Intelligence Committee. Mm-hmm. I guess.
Well, thank you. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was going to be a smart ass, so it's fine. I was just going to say maybe Susan Goff's is not maybe it's partisan politics. Maybe she feels like, it's going to be a change in public affairs, which it will be. We'll have a new undersecretary or assistant secretary for public affairs coming up soon. So, which
was another interesting part of your article, is that it demonstrated something we didn't know has all this kind of rotating door that we've had with leadership in the DOD has had affected this issue. And it has.
It absolutely has. And yes, it absolutely has, to the point where I think at a certain point in time, the partisan politics that we have seen very much in the media in other areas has influenced this topic down to, when we had Dana White, the first spokesperson, who said what she said about ATIP and Elizondo, and then that change. And I think that's had a huge influence, and hopefully some stability. Some stability in some way, shape, or form will be good.
Right. So let me post. It is thedebrief.org. A couple people came in late and they're asking about where to find all this stuff. I guess, is there any future articles you want to plug? Anything coming up that you want to give us exclusive insight into?
God, no, I am not hyping or briefing anything. No, just, I mean, in general, just, stay tuned. We have a lot of things that we want to do with the debrief, just in a lot of different ways and a lot of different genres. And so, in terms of the UAP subject or UFOs, sure, we're going to cover it. We're going to try to cover it responsibly. We're going to try to cover it when we feel like it's significant news wise. But outside of that, I hope people tune in. I mean, we'll cover a lot of really interesting topics that are in the science and technology world. And down to some of the maybe what would be called more, I would say go to Tyler Rogoway at the War Zone, because he's going to give you all the great stuff on the defense world and like how the thing works under the hood. Man, they're experts at that. The reason we're called the Debrief is because in some instances we're going to try to break it down and give you like the more bullet point kind of touch over. So maybe it's an issue that's interesting to you want to hear just a little bit about it and go on from there. So we will handle that in news. I just say, and we welcome feedback. You can get in touch with us there, because this is we're early in the stages. We want to grow. We want to put something out that people enjoy. And so no specific articles. I'm taking a sabbatical.
Really? Well, you guys launched with so many articles. It was really impressive, and I think that was smart to do that, so it looked like you had a lot of content. So that's really cool. But way to go! You guys are already some of my favorite dudes, and these are really cool topics. I'm glad that this project includes the gamut of topics that you are looking into. So very excited for what you guys are doing. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us right now, because I'm sure you're swamped with questions and people wanting to know more about these articles. So thank you again.
No problem. It was a pleasure, Alejandro. Thank you.
All right, the debrief.org. Everybody check that out. I'll have more links. I'll put in the show notes. If you haven't already, do please subscribe to the site and also join, because you'll be able to watch this video for a while, but eventually it will go into the membership area. So just for a couple bucks, you get more Tim McMillan. I've interviewed him in the past. We get Luis Elizondo, Chris Mellon, a lot of really great interviews that you can check out there. So thank you all so much for joining. Thank you so much, Tim. And we'll see you all later.
All right. Thanks. See you later. Bye.
Got to bring up one of my cool videos here.